Alright, so I don't normally do this, but ever since Christmas break of last year, I've been running through a bunch of different Resident Evil games. First, I started with the remakes of Resident Evils 2, 3, and 4. That led directly into the release of Resident Evil 9, and that then made me want to go back and play Resident Evil 7 and 8 for the very first time. So I figured, now that I've played all of the mainline Resident Evil games, with the exception of the original Resident Evil 3, I can finally and fairly rank all of the games on an S tier list. And I would start this list by ranking the original Resident Evil as an S tier game. Now, I wouldn't say this is my favorite game in the franchise, especially since I haven't played it in so long, but this is an iconic game. It's the original. It started it all. It created an entirely new genre within the world of gaming. Survivor horror games are the way they are today because of Resident Evil. And for that reason, I think it absolutely qualifies as being an S tier game. But I personally like Resident Evil 2 even better than the original. Not only is it one of my favorite Resident Evil games, but it's also one of my favorite video games of all time. Hell, I still have the cartridge from the N64 version that I used to play all of the time. I absolutely love this game, and I think it definitely deserves to be an S tier. Now, I'll be skipping over Resident Evil 3 Nemesis since I never played that game for myself, but if I ever get around to replaying some of the older games, I wouldn't mind going back to play this one either. And that brings us to the original Resident Evil remake, which I have not played in an extremely long time. Now, I know most people regard it as being even better than the original game, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, but since I don't really remember playing it, this is a game that I'd like to revisit before giving it an S tier ranking. Still, the game is highly regarded for a reason, so I'm comfortably going to put it in A tier. Now, I'm not sure if Resident Evil 0 qualifies as being a mainline title in the franchise, but I did play this game when it first came out, so I'm going to put it on this list just for the hell of it. Unfortunately, while I do remember having a lot of fun playing it at the time, I don't remember too much else about it. Which definitely doesn't mean that it's a bad game, I just think it makes a poor comparison to the games that are already on this list. And for that reason, I think I would put it in B tier. But of course, Resident Evil 4 is widely regarded as one of the best video games of all time, and it's also one of my personal favorite video games of all time. It's an endlessly fun game that completely flipped the script on the survival horror genre, it reinvented the franchise, and it still holds up to this day. It easily qualifies as being an S tier game. Resident Evil 5, however, is not as well regarded. Resident Evil 4 was so radically different that 5 tried a little too hard to lean into the more action-oriented elements in the genre. But by doing so, the game strayed too far from the spirit of the original games, resulting in one of the weakest entries in the entire franchise, one that I would have to put in C tier. But it is of course not the worst mainline Resident Evil game, as that honor definitely goes to Resident Evil 6. Now, I do remember having fun playing this game when it first came out, as do a lot of people, but that doesn't change the fact that this is a messy, bloated, and convoluted game that is trying to do way too many things at once. It's definitely the worst game in the entire series, in my opinion at least. I mean, it was so bad that it made me fall off the franchise completely, which is exactly why I never played 7 or 8 or any of the remakes when they first came out. 6 made me lose my interest in Resident Evil, and for that, it easily qualifies as being a D tier game. Now, thankfully I have gone back to play the newer games because I was definitely missing out on some quality content. Resident Evil 7 is an A tier game. Capcom clearly learned their lessons from 6, as 7 feels like the complete antithesis of what came out before. It tells a small-scaled story filled with new characters who weren't all that special in an environment that actually felt grounded. It took the franchise back to its roots, and the first-person perspective felt like a breath of fresh air. So I really enjoyed this game, and I think Resident Evil 8 is actually much better. I don't think it qualifies as being an S-tier game, but I would easily place it in A-tier. I had a lot of fun with this one. I especially enjoyed how it continued the story of 7, but took place in a Resident Evil 4 type of village, because that's a fantastic combination. But I elaborate a bit more on this in my full review of the game, so you can feel free to check out that video if you'd like. But the reason I started this gaming binge in the first place is because the remake of Resident Evil 2 is absolutely incredible. It might actually be my favorite installment in the entire franchise. As soon as I finished the game, I immediately started playing it again because it was just that much fun. Thankfully, there are 4 different versions of the campaign that you can run through, so I played each and every one of them back to back to back, and it was fun. This game, to me, perfectly captures the spirit of what Resident Evil is all about, and I didn't play it when it first came out, since I didn't think it could possibly be as good as the original game. But somehow, Capcom made a game that perfectly captures the essence of the original and enhances it with modern gaming mechanics. It's incredibly scary, incredibly challenging, and incredibly fun. I love it so much. Easily one of the best Resident Evil games. If anyone ever wanted to experience what Resident Evil is all about, I would tell them to play this game. S tier for sure, hands down, no doubt about it. Unfortunately, the success of Resident Evil 2 was followed up with a remake of Resident Evil 3, which is just nowhere near as good. I still had a lot of fun playing it, especially since it was technically my first exposure to this story, but I still found it to be a little underwhelming. Without being able to compare it to the original, I can still tell that this game was probably rushed out. It feels frustratingly short and incomplete, almost like it should have been Resident Evil 2 DLC or something. And it leans more heavily into action as opposed to the stealthy survival horror elements that I prefer. So for that, I think I would put it in B tier. Now, Resident Evil 4, as I stated earlier, is widely regarded as being one of the best video games of all time, so you would think that a remake would be nowhere near as good. However, it is an absolutely incredible game. I had a complete blast playing this, and there's nothing I can say about it that hasn't been said already, but I think it's a fantastic game that deserves to be in the ranks as one of the best video games of all time again. S tier. And that brings us to the most recent edition of the franchise, Resident Evil Requiem. A game that received a lot of praise upon its release, but I actually have mixed feelings on it. Not that I didn't have a fun time playing it, I just think that the story is a little cartoonish and convoluted for its own good. My favorite parts of the game were the more grounded and horrific segments, as opposed to the more action-oriented, over-the-top, and nostalgia-baity parts. It's still a good game though, which means that I think I would ultimately place it in A tier. And that would be my personal S tier ranking of the Resident Evil games. But if you want to know how I would rank them from worst to best, I would go with Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 0, the original Resident Evil, Resident Evil Requiem, the Resident Evil remake, Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil Village, the original Resident Evil 4, the original Resident Evil 2, the Resident Evil 4 remake, and finally, the Resident Evil 2 remake. But yeah, let me know what you think of this video, let me know what you think of my rankings, be sure to let me know how you would rank the Resident Evil games, and as always, thanks for watching.